podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media, put a legal spin on it, and like all lawyers, ruin it. I am one of your co-hosts, Diana, and joining me today are my wonderful co-hosts. Please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Jenny.
And I'm Liz.
And we are handling a more serious film today after a string
no,
of less serious
No
films.
apple pies today.
No apple pies. We are going to handle a 2002 drama thriller, Minority Report. It is a wonderful film. I think that is pretty much universally determined.
Critical acclaim, got a lot of awards. I
Steven
looked it
Spielberg.
up. It got high marks.
Yes, Steven Spielberg.
It was a blockbuster at the time.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, and I believe, at the time, every single critic just agreed that this
I
was
had
a
totally forgotten
masterfully
Spielberg
done
directed
movie.
it until
Spielberg
I saw
directed
the end.
it.
Yeah,
and
it was well
John
done.
Williams does the
Yeah.
music, and
Yeah.
the cinematography is Janusz, like the amazing
The famous
cinematographer,
guy.
the famous guy. It's just a master class in filmmaking, essentially. And you've got Tom Cruise doing what Tom Cruise does best, which is running and fighting
doing his own
and
stunts.
doing
It's
his own
true.
stunts.
And since Mission Impossible's coming out soon,
I know.
it actually really made
He's still doing it.
I was like, oh, it's like Mission Impossible in the future.
20 years later, he's still doing it.
Yeah, he's like in his 60s, and the new Mission Impossible has him
Yeah.
on the side of a plane, and that's actually him doing
Props.
it.
I mean, committed to the craft.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
The movie basically imagines a futuristic world and where
2054.
Where
Which I figured out is 39 years ahead. If I make it, I'll be about 82,
39 years ahead of what?
where we are
Oh,
right
where
now.
we are right now.
Four?
No?
No. What
Did I do- did I do the
30
math?
years.
30
30
the math
years.
wrong?
You did
That's
the math
29 years
29.
ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that
29.
doesn't sound
30.
right.
Oh, that's it. I have a problem with numbers, guys.
So you
Sorry.
didn't quite
I
figure it
wrote
out.
39, meant 29. Sorry.
That's all right.
You
29
were,
years.
you were very close.
So close.
And,
So
you know,
close. Anyway.
the creepy thing is, and we were talking about this, upon rewatching, because I hadn't seen this movie in a very long time, and I watched it 2 nights ago with my
Same.
husband, we were really taken aback by just how much of it is plausible, because we're not that far off from
Like
that now.
not in that exact way, but to a certain degree.
Well, yes.
Right?
But the surveillance of people.
Conceptually,
Yeah.
yes.
The surveillance, like...
The
what-
actual technology,
they are doing-
no flipping way.
Well,
Yeah, I don't
not
think so.
necessar- I mean, not even...
I don't know that we're
necessarily.
going to be driving cars up buildings.
No, we're not going to be doing that. But like the way that there's like the retinal scans, and I mean, we already have that. I check in for a flight, and they scan my face and my eyes, and
Yeah.
that's like the clear.
Yeah.
You have like Delta
Yeah.
Clear, whatever it is, and that's how I fly, and that's how they know it's me. And we also, our phones are basically our retinas now,
Yeah.
so they know every purchase, every search that you do, what you're thinking, what you're into. If you say something out loud, your
It's
phone
gonna
picks
show
it up
up.
and then gives you ads about it.
Which is the creepiest thing, by the way, and I don't appreciate it because it makes me feel like someone is watching me at all times.
But they
and listening
are.
to me at
No,
all
but this
times.
They
movie
are.
was really
Yeah.
It's
it was
surveillance.
really prescient in that way, because when I watched it, I'm like, well, geez, we've got these issues right now, which is part of the reason why we picked it, because of all the AI
Yeah.
that's happening right now.
Absolutely.
It's definitely plausible as far as that goes.
No, it's happening. It's not even like we're not even looking towards the future. That's what's happening now. It's just instead of our retinas, it's our phones picking up what we're saying,
Yeah.
looking at, thinking. They
But
can just they
the
know.
phones have facial recognition
Right.
and
Yeah.
fingerprint recognition and all this other
The-
stuff. And
the entire premise of the movie is, this commentary on society and this commentary on all these ethical implications of these laws and free will, and we'll get into all of that. So, I mean,
But picture it, right? So at the
Yeah.
beginning of the movie, and it's not too far off from right now, because I feel like people are getting, and this happens a lot, but people are getting really outraged at the whole idea of all the crime. There's so
Yeah.
much crime. Our crime rates are high. It's the same thing that's going on in this movie.
Yeah.
Apparently the crime rate was, the murder rate,
the homicide rate.
the homicide rate in particular was the highest it had ever been.
Yeah.
And people were basically fed up. And they wanted something to be done about it, and that's where this whole system came up.
Right. And so they develop what's called they call it the pre-crime unit, and it effectively predicts homicides.
that have not
Murders
yet happened.
only. Right.
They are. It's predictive. So
It is a major moral dilemma.
right.
Oh, yeah.
and
And
it's yeah.
They have these precogs that they call them, who I don't remember if I watched this movie when it first came out. Maybe I did. I don't know. I don't remember.
I know
anything
I
about
I
it.
saw it in the theater.
I did.
If
yeah.
I did see it, I remembered nothing about it. So for all intents and purposes, I was watching it for the first time.
Okay.
And so when I was watching it, I couldn't understand whether these were robots or humans. And obviously,
They're humans.
they are humans. And what we learn
They are
is
born with this gift because they are children of these
drug addicts,
drug addicts, and
basically.
so they are born. It's kind of like a birth defect where they can predict the future. They can see the future.
And someone realized that they can, I mean, look, effectively monetize it and put it to use, right? Because someone realized that whatever visions they were seeing were actually coming to fruition. And so they now took these 3 precogs, a woman and 2 men,
the 2 men are twins.
right? And they hold them prisoner effectively, right? I think that's
Pretty much.
that's the 1st
They're
legal
under
issue we're going to
They're
tackle.
under sedation.
And they're in this water, this milky
water,
Yeah.
right?
And they're trying to keep them calm and trying to, but like they're providing whatever nutrition I guess they basically
He's brushing her
need.
teeth in one of the scenes.
And
like this.
he's creepy, by the way.
I know, but I
The
kind of
guy
like him.
who
I
takes
like him
care
though
of
when
the
he was.
precogs is creepy.
No, but I liked
they're his
him.
friends.
Yeah, and he
I
talks to
mean-
them about his like life, and he's brushing her teeth, and then he tells John. I mean, we'll get to this, but later
was
on, he's like,
super
"You've always
creepy.
been really nice to me, and because of that, I'm going to give you a 2-minute head start
Yeah.
before I sound
That's
the
true.
alarm."
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like,
But-
"Good for you."
I mean, but
the point is that they've taken these 3 people who probably did not want this and did
No, they
not
were
want
children.
to. They were children. They didn't want to
were
be a part of
kidnapped.
it.
look, it was an
essentially-
entire study with all of these kids, and they say in the movie that most of the kids died. They did not survive the experiments that they were doing.
And by admission, they say that they either died because of the effects of the drugs,
Right.
or because of what they did. All of these experiments that were run on them.
And just remember, this is like the government doing
Yes.
this. Like,
This is
not,
the government.
This is not some
Yeah.
evil like lab. I mean, it's actually very- well,
I mean, that's the moral part of it.
Right.
Were they evil or not? What were their intentions?
but the fact that it was the government, who was doing this, who was like kidnapping and detaining these children against their will and holding them prisoner to do experiments on them and then using them for the system. They are not willing participants.
And by the way, they're lying to the American public about it. There's a scene when Tom Cruise's character is on the run. There's a scene where he kind of is in the middle of this tour that they're giving to people of the facility.
talking
and-
about
Yeah,
the
in front of
pre-crime
the
unit.
statue.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And they say, oh, the precogs get all these letters written to them. Like everyone's a big fan of the precogs, and the precogs live this amazing life. They have
really, they don't
they
have
watch
any
TV,
free will. No,
and
they
you know
don't
they
get anything.
relax. They have no free will.
They can't talk or communicate or have anything. They don't do anything.
No, and in fact, they're purposefully, he says, maintained in
Sedated.
isolation. But
And-
in
and
isolation,
sedated.
they don't want them coming into contact with anybody because they're afraid it's going to compromise the integrity of the system.
Right, but they're also
Right.
sedated because you see
Yeah,
that when
they
they
are.
return Agatha, and this is later on, but that he has to he injects something into her neck to sedate her. Like they're not even. I mean, they're just drugged this entire time.
and they're on this drug. Again, I forget. Noravin.
Well,
That's what their
Heroin.
parents were on. It's kind
Right.
of like a futuristic heroin.
Yeah, that was my assumption.
And that's what
Yeah.
their parents were taking, and I guess they were exposed to in utero.
Which I guess the implication is that it affects your neurological system in some way,
yeah.
and that must be where the
Presumably so.
enhanced brain
You know,
power
right.
maybe came
But
from.
the whole idea of them taking these children and doing these experiments really was reminiscent of Stranger Things and what happened to 11
yeah.
and it's these children are born with these weird gifts.
Yeah.
Let's watch them and
Yeah.
hold them prisoner forever.
Oh yeah, made me think of Firestarter too.
Oh, yeah,
Major throwback. But yeah, this idea of using people for their gifts.
Right.
Definitely, there's been a bunch of movies about that kind of
E.T..
stuff. Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
and so this the movie's done very well, and we can delve into kind of the issues around the entire system that has been, rolled out. So it's only been 6 years of this program,
and only in Washington.
It's a
Only
test program.
Right.
And right now they're in a big political thing because they're trying to say, look how successful it is.
They wanna
There is
expand it.
zero murder in
the
DC.
last 6 years.
It is the safest
and
place.
it went from being the most
highest.
murder-ridden
Yep.
place to zero murders.
Well, so
Right.
let's talk about the actual process.
And now they want to, but they want to roll it out. So there's
Yes.
a big political
Campaign.
vote
They're
at
at the
stake
precipice
right now.
of
They are.
potentially
Are we
bringing this
going
to
to
the rest of
vote
the
to roll
nation.
this out everywhere else?
Basically federally.
Or what? And
Yeah.
they're voting on it. I mean, so there are some remnants of our own government and society because we are voting on it still.
and I just don't understand how they make no mention of the Supreme Court. They make no mention
No,
of the
they don't.
Constitution. The only The only thing that we see that is potentially like a checks and balances type of situation is Colin Farrell's character, who comes in and says that
And he says he works for the federal prosecutor.
he works for the attorney general, I think he says,
You
right?
also see in the beginning, because it opens with a scene where there's a husband who comes home to find his wife in bed with some guy, and he murders
He
the
stabs him
guy,
with
and then he
scissors.
murders the
wife.
wife.
At least this is what they
This is what the
see
Precogs
him
do.
doing.
Now, it's
right.
seemingly accurate because everything does play out the same way that the Precogs predicted it.
Yeah.
And you see that John, which is Tom Cruise's character, that he and his unit are like, they're like, let's go. Let's
And that
arrest
was
this
I
guy.
had to remember his name, Ari Gross, because he's a really great actor too. And he only shows up in that
Yes,
beginning scene,
yes.
but he's a really good actor.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. So he plays poor Howard.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Who finds his
he
wife
can't- and
in
he's
bed.
like blind without his glasses. So he comes home
Flagrant
to get his
delicto
glasses.
with someone else, okay?
Which is a crime of passion.
It is.
And
And that's why, because it's a crime of passion, they don't. The Precogs can't predict it like several days out,
she predicted it like 13 minutes ahead of
right?
time.
Because of like,
And
the
it comes
premedit-
up as a red ball because that symbolizes the passion, right?
I guess.
the crime of passion
the
that
crime
there
of-
wasn't
right.
like it wasn't premeditated. It was
Right.
done in the moment, and so they don't have that much time, but they have to find him and arrest him before he kills them, right?
Right.
And it does play out exactly correctly, right?
Yes.
And nothing is
For the
amiss.
most part, except the biggest constitutional nightmare is there actually is not an act.
right?
That's
So-
right.
They allegedly stop it before he does it.
Okay,
but
so yeah, that's basically
that's the whole premise
And
of the movie,
as they're
right?
hauling him out of there, so
And he says, "I didn't do anything," and he's right.
and he says, I didn't do anything. And I think he also says, I wasn't going to do anything. I think he says,
I
right?
think he does too.
And
So,
so,
well, if we're gonna go like, what the issues are,
Yeah.
like, I mean,
It's a constitutional nightmare.
Yeah,
so
of
go
course.
through-
and
yeah.
literally every aspect of this is like they just touch on every single aspect of the Constitution.
100%.
essentially. But
and
like,
violated in every way
yeah,
possible.
so like they violate our due process rights, right? Like you have the right to, you're innocent until proven guilty. There's the
They have predetermined
you have
your
a Fifth
guilt.
Amendment right to due process under
Yeah.
the Fifth Amendment for federal
Yep.
government, and then the 14th Amendment applies that to the states and local jurisdictions. You have the same state and local right to innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
This takes that away from you because they're just saying you are guilty.
There's
Because someone predicted it.
There's one
Right.
scene where they're talking about something like this, and they actually refer to it in the past tense. Like they refer to it as if, and I don't remember which particular crime it was about, but they refer to it as it has already been done because they take the Precogs vision
As though it had already been done.
right. It's fact. It happened. We've seen it in their vision.
Because we saw it on the screen
Right.
that came from their brains. That is a crime that has been
100%.
committed.
It has
So
been
you
committed.
have basically distilled the entire, and I'm just going to say murder because they limited it to murder.
And they
in
do
this
note that.
test.
They note that it does
It
not
is
work
limited
for other
right.
things.
It's only limited to murder. So they've taken this entire category of crime.
Yes.
Okay. And basically just distilled it down to you thought it's going to happen. And
Guilty.
so the entire system is dependent on the visions of three people. Think about that.
Right.
3 people
Yeah.
have the power in their hands
Right.
to convict someone and say, no, they're going to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
You've lost free will.
Yes.
You've lost the ability to even have the
trial.
argument that you changed your mind.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
So
just
basically, it's assuming your guilt from a prediction.
Absolutely.
And there is no crime that has been committed. It's just basically saying you will have committed it, and therefore it has been committed.
Right. There's no right to a trial.
Nope.
There's no, you can't confront your
Right.
witnesses
And
or
we'll,
accusers.
get
Nope.
into that too, because those are like separate amendments. That they are
Nothing.
just like
They just
completely
stick
taking
like
away.
this, they call it the halo. They just stick this halo on them, and then they're suspended in this, like, I don't know, jelly-like fluid.
Although I have
and this
to
is
say,
where they spend
I
the
really
rest of
kind
ever.
of like. This is now I'm getting conceptual, right? But I kind of like the idea of that kind of a prison system almost instead
kind?
of
No.
what we have now. No, I do because they're kind of like suspended in this animation. The prison guy is playing music for them. You kind of assume they're just
But they
sort
don't.
of like,
They literally are. It's essentially
But
you're
they think-
just getting like the death penalty. You are no longer alive. You don't get to think or
And
read
what
or
about-
breathe or eat.
but you're not dead.
But
hold
you
on.
are dead because
What
you're
about-
essentially in a vegetative state. They're just putting you in a coma.
But you could come out of it.
What about the
But they
concept
don't.
of what about the concept of rehabilitation? There's no potential for that. Is there a possibility of parole? Like none of
No,
they don't
none
have
of that.
any of that,
None of
right?
that.
No, they're
so there's
taking away
no
your
At
free
least
will.
not that we saw.
No,
Right.
it wasn't
No,
addressed.
It was
No.
like you can't be well, and so apparently in the future they have decided that the goal of prisons is no longer rehabilitation;
Right.
it is merely punishment.
right.
Because that's the conundrum we have now. What are our prisons supposed to be about? Right? Are we punishing
Or
or are we
rehabilitating,
rehabilitating people to
right.
come back into society? So that's the debate we have right
Right.
now.
Right.
Right.
So another issue is the reliability of the evidence, right? Like
Yep.
they just decided these three
Oh, God, this
precogs that
bothers
this
me
is
so
like
much.
actual scientific evidence, and we have a standard called a Dobert standard that comes from a case called like Dobert v.
Dobert.
something. It's a pharmaceutical case.
Oh, yeah.
And it set the standard of what we're looking for in terms of expert testimony and
Mm-hmm.
and scientific evidence and like what is actual scientific factual evidence. Like, and this is just not scientific. It's three people who were just relying on their
and they
their
try
thoughts.
to they try to there's this like
So think about
semblance
that.
of preserving there's this like idea of we're going to preserve the evidence or we're going to preserve the integrity of the evidence, right? Because
Oh, so they record their thoughts.
they record their thoughts
And they have three separate streams for each one of them. Right.
But then also, once that ball comes out, where
Yeah.
it's the victims and the perpetrator,
Right.
Tom Cruise then contacts what he calls like these two external witnesses, and it's like a judge, chief justice, or
It's
something.
how he's getting his warrant, essentially.
it is.
They
He's
have to
getting an
approve
arrest.
it.
He's
But-
getting an arrest warrant by proving it.
But the only way he proves it is that they are watching the screen
Yes,
as
Which
he's
is
watching
coming
the
from
screen.
these people's minds. They're not
Mm-hmm.
watching a video of this person's home.
No.
They're just watching thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's like there's no peer review. Like all the steps you take to
they
make
call it a
evidence
peer review.
to
though.
make, but like
it's
in
not
terms
a
of like
real-
a scientific
No.
peer review, like the admissibility and reliability of evidence requires certain steps. Like you have to actually prove it in certain ways.
They're not-
and there's peer review. There's this like there's actual steps you
what
have to
the
meet.
reliability
Right,
of
like
that
what the
yeah. Mm-hmm.
techniques are for testing it. And
They're
you
not
know.
actually seeing it. Like those two witnesses, they're not actually seeing it in real time. They're just still seeing the visions that are presented to them, right? So I'm going to present something to you, and you're going to say, oh, "Okay, since you presented it to me, that must be true."
That was it. It was a complete rubber stamping process, and that bothered me to no. Like, I mean, they just like, okay, yeah, we'll accept what we're seeing here on the screen. And it's literally thing.
Look, we have people who claim to be psychics, right?
Right. That's
I mean, when they say, "Oh, you have psychics," there has no admissibility to a psychic prediction.
no, it is not
that are telling evidence.
It's not reliable.
Right.
Inherently.
Psychic evidence are not accepted evidence.
Because they are subject to interpretation,
Right.
right? By the people listening to it, by the people who see it, they're all subject to interpretation. And I've been to different psychics, and they'll all tell you they have a different modality, right? Some people will see pictures, some people will see symbols, and they have to interpret the symbols and what it means. Like,
But it then brings it back around to what we were saying. How do you arrest someone for a crime that has not been committed?
and that's the core issue right here, right? So what's our constitutional like lesson that we already looked into, right? You need two elements
Yeah.
for the crime of to be committed, right? You need the not only the mens rea, which is what they're focusing on, the thought and the intent of doing it, right? But then you need the actual actus rea,
Which is the
that someone actually
There
doing
has to be an actual act or position for there to be a crime. That is the actual physical crime, or either you've acted or you've omitted an act that constitutes a crime, and then your mindset is needed, and the two things together make actual actionable crime.
What if the husband who the precogs saw murdering his wife and her lover with the scissors, what if at the very last second he would have been like, "Oh my God, what am I doing?"
Well,
here?"
they always this, and they would say that the precogs would have seen that, right? That's how they are interpreting.
There's just a dying their own.
That's how they're justifying it. Right.
Yeah.
But again, this is where it comes up with these ethical implications of free will. Just because they saw it that way, doesn't it give him the opportunity? Doesn't he have the free will to say, "I'm not going to do it that way"? Which, then if we jump ahead towards the end of the movie, where Tom Cruise is trying to prove his innocence, but ultimately he ends up where Agatha has placed him. She is the one yelling to him, "You can choose. You can decide to change your fate," effectively, right?
Basically, and it's actually funny that you say that because you just brought up the word. Because when I think about the three precogs, it made me think of the three fates in addictology.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I thought about. Was like, holy crap! Like,
And just because they predict it to happen, can you change your fate?
but isn't that like
Well, it undermines the entire requirement of what our entire criminal justice system is predicated on, which is having the mindset to commit a crime. Because that's why we have things like manslaughter or like reckless, like there's endangerment. There's like you didn't have the mindset to do it, but it was accidental, and we got negligence and whatnot.
And you set motion to affect that.
But if we are fated to commit crimes, then can we be held accountable for those crimes? If it's our fate, then we have no autonomy. We don't have any moral or legal responsibility.
Which is what this movie is premised on. Right? This is exactly what they say. They basically say you have no control over your fate. If the precogs told us it was going to happen, that means that's it.
And yet, in the movie, the precog herself says, no, you do have the power. I had to change it.
She says, you have the power, you can change her. He could change John when he's at the crossroad. Because what happens in the movie is Tom Cruise, he is doing his everyday job, and and then he gets, she gets these visions, and it's him on the screen. He's the one pulling the trigger, killing someone. His name is on the bull. And he's shocked because he's like, I don't even know what. And then all he can do at that point is run.
Right.
And then
because they will automatically arrest him.
Right.
Even though Anne says, I have no idea.
Not only arrest him, but they will also imprison him. Like there is no. They are judge, jury, executioner, everything. And that's another issue. It's just like the lack of judicial oversight. So
no due process.
There's no due process. So the Sixth Amendment gives you the right to a trial by jury.
Right. We're straight up in a common law class.
There's a judiciary review to any kind of criminal proceeding. You are allowed to have a judge preside over your case, to have to face your witnesses, to question your witnesses. All of this is part of your constitutional right. They've stripped it all.
But this almost becomes this like self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
Because had Agatha not seen this being committed or this potential murder being committed, that ball with his name would never have popped out.
Right.
He never would have known the name Leo Crow, who is the intended victim, right? So how does this?
It's like a catch-22. It's like
It's like funny though. I wasn't sure where the movie was going with it at one point, and I thought because they said that they intentionally keep the precogs separate, and they don't have them commingle with it because they don't want to taint the process.
Right.
When John went into the temple, as they call it, and ended up that Agatha grabbed him.
Yes.
And I thought at first that tampered her brain, and she pulled his name out because he had touched her and they had this mental connection.
Well, because she said, do you see? And it's all about, she needed someone to see who actually killed her mother. Which is what it comes down to is she's like seeking his help essentially.
Basically.
To like expose that her mother was murdered by Lamar, who was Christopher Plummer, who's overseeing, is the head of this. He's like, this is his baby, right? Like he's the godfather of Precogs.
Spoiler alert.
Right. And so it's like she grabs him, and I think that's really what they don't say explicitly, but what sets off this in motion is that like, okay, like this is kind of like why they get connected to one another. She had something from him. He's being framed by Lamar. That's like Lamar is like paying off this guy Leo Crow to pretend that he's. A backstory is John, his son, like years ago, was kidnapped from a public pool and never found.
When they were together, never found.
It was outside the scenes.
So, I mean, like, he's basically in 6 years of agony, grief, and misery. He's like, if I can stop, and I get it, somebody that's so wrapped up in that kind of grief and had such traumatic crime happen in their own family would absolutely want to do whatever they can to prevent it from happening to somebody else.
Even if it's the complete extreme.
Right. Like, I almost can understand where he came from in that regard, with wanting to do that.
And so when others might question it or be like, I don't know if I like buy this, he's still gung ho because he's like, he's influenced by this experience in his life. One more thing about the fact that it's like there's no judge, jury, they're all one party, is like there's a whole separation of powers issue. Like we have the cops do their job. Then it goes to the checks and balances system here, where someone is checking to see whether the cops actually did the right thing because they're the ones determining your guilt. Right. And then it goes on.
And the next one is that the prosecutor about it says, can we charge these?
It's a grand jury. Like, I mean, literally, there's so many steps until you get convicted and sentenced. Yeah. And these are all wrapped into one by the same division. Just the pre-crime division gets to do all of it. Yeah. And then just place you into their jail. So,
But
huge issue there.
how has the Supreme Court of the United States, how have they not at any point stepped into this? I understand that this is like a trial run of this program in DC, but there are so many
There's still the courts there. I mean,
right, but this is such a constitutional violation on so many different levels. And there's no mention of the Supreme Court.
No, because I think it's because we don't even know what the legal landscape is in the year 2054 according to this movie. Because, for instance,
have they amended?
it's not like they used a precog system to then place these people into a normal jail. They have changed everything, including the fact that you don't go to a normal jail. You are suspended in this weird pod.
Which begs the question of what's happening in
Hours. What's happening, even though they don't have a precog system, is everyone else being placed into these weird, like, suspended pods after going through a proper trial,
No, and there's also a in terms of like searches and surveillance when they're looking for Tom Cruise's character when he's on the run after he's had an eye transplant.
So that was going to be my next point is the unlawful searches and surveillance aspect of this movie.
They've tracked him down to a particular building, but they need to find him, so they need to scan everybody's in the building's eyes. And so they send in these like spider scanners, right? And they announce to the whole building that we're about to send spiders into your.
So everybody needs to get scanned. So just
However, we have that now. We're not getting scanned by spiders. They know where you are at any point because your cell phone will ping because they know where you are. We're tracking people. We can find people at any time now.
But these spiders are literally entering their homes, and there's not a thing that they can do about it. And they
cannot refuse access because if they refuse access, they're going to assume they're out.
But there's that one scene where the little child is saying how like scared he is, and the mom is like, "Just stand still and open your eyes; it'll be done in a second."
Right.
There's nothing they can do about it. These spiders literally invade their homes, and they.
I know. And they're so used to it that there's like a couple that's in the middle of fighting and pushing each other and yelling at each other, and then they stop for a second, let them scan, and go right back to fighting with each other because they're so used to it.
Dude sitting on the toilet, and it's just.
But that's I mean, an invasion of privacy, but it's not that far off from where we are being surveilled.
I thought it was really interesting that the building that they went into was clearly like a low rank, sort of like poor section.
But you can't walk into like a store without them scanning your eyes and say, "Hello, Mr. Smith. Like, how are you doing today? Do you like those pants that you bought?"
I'm 100% right. There's no class difference there, but they went storming into this building or basically
and doing enough like they would do it in a different building.
I'm saying, like, even
I they would do it in a luxury building too. If they thought that he just happened to be hiding out there because he was going to get his retinas done.
No, but I was just
low.
I think it's no different than cops going into poor buildings now.
But I think they would have done it in any. Yeah, I think they would have done it in a luxury building too.
They don't get to just go in and search everyone without a search warrant. They don't get to just go in and open doors and go into their apartments and say, let me see who you are.
We're not looking for a criminal in the building.
And they have a reason. They have a
reasonable search.
Yeah, because they think that this criminal, they've scanned it. They know that he went into this building.
Hold up. You're trying to tell me that if they're looking for a criminal, they can just storm in any which apartment looking for them? No, don't they need some sort of warrant or some sort of reasonable?
But if they get a warrant, that's cool.
In a manhunt, it says in a
say that because he can search go that building because we know he went into that building. They absolutely can do that.
Did they get a so-called warrant in this case with the spiders? I mean, they don't show it.
I think, but if you're chasing someone who's on the run and you're in the middle of a chase, I think you are able to then, he goes into this building, you then storm into that building because you are in the middle of chasing someone who's on the run. Right. So I think it's like that, but there are a lot of issues with regards to like whether or not you can, a lot of the movie is just unlawful searches and seizures and like, everywhere.
But can I talk about one part that, in my opinion, like the fatal technical flaws of this movie, because they're so highly they were so highly advanced in so many ways, right? Yeah. We're arresting people for having thought about the crime, not having actually done it yet. We're scanning everybody. Everybody's retinas are getting scanned. That's how they identify everybody. They can track you anywhere, basically, is the idea. They have these robots that can do that. Yet, in the two cases that we saw this pre-crime unit handle,
yes,
they could not find these people.
Yes, right.
Why?
Right.
Why is it such a complicated process, especially in the beginning, to find the house
I know.
in D.C. where this guy's about to murder his wife and I like
and that, like the fact that it's so advanced, and then he's like, okay, wait, there's this merry-go-round, this kid's on merry-go-round, there's
I think it's a park.
He's like, there's 16 parks that have this merry-go-round, and then they're like trying to figure out which door to go into, and you're like, hey, can you go back? He like has to call the precinct and say, can you go back into the tape and see? Then he closed the door behind him, and then the guy's like, no, it's still open, and that's how they know.
Right?
Like, today we could find someone so much easier because we're paying cell phones it's so much easier to track people than it is in this movie.
His crime fighting was this on a board.
Yeah, I mean,
Moving things around.
putting his hands.
Oh, I know, but like, it's weird because the surveillance seems so advanced, but our surveillance today is way more advanced.
I guess no.
You can find a person anywhere.
Doesn't it almost strike you that in that environment, you would think that everybody would be chipped by that point,
You would think.
right?
We will be someday. So, I mean, but like, I mean, it's very easy to find people now, like because you no.
Well, but listen, maybe in 2002, it wasn't so easy.
No, it is, but like, and it wasn't, all right. But like, it's weird that they got a lot out of right, but some of it, like, even we're not in 20, we still have 30 years until this future, and we're already way past what they thought it would be.
Maybe Steven Spielberg couldn't quite like grasp how easy it would be to find somebody. Do you know what I mean?
I guess it's like, but like the pinging, like it's all like this the pinging.
Well, I don't know if I don't know. It was based on a story by Philip K. Dick, who writes a lot of like this dystopian sci-fi future stuff, right? So I don't know how much of it is like what he had in his story that they created the movie on, or how much they thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you look at these things and you talk about the future, like, and maybe we'll get there at one point. But even like when we Back to the Future, we all love it.
Love it.
But and it's our times right now. But that's not our.
It was 2015.
But that's not our world.
No,
Like
we don't have flying cars.
we don't. Like, and not for nothing. In this car too, there was cars everywhere driving up the walls, like doing. And I don't think that's gonna happen by 2050.
We don't even have hoverboards. I mean, we do, but like,
I know.
Like, I don't think that's gonna happen. I really don't.
I think maybe just Steven Spielberg couldn't predict.
The level of surveillance, but like it is weird because they are just
Weird, right?
the surveillance. It's like there's a lot of it that's right, but like every time they couldn't find someone,
Or like no sense, right?
but I can find that person easily now. Like we know exactly where people like live, and like I mean, even just the idea that like they know this guy's name, they know who to arrest, and what you can't figure out which door is his. Like you have his address, though. Like
It's that meme you and I looked just like, did you add it to one of Robert Downey Jr. from Iron Man? Where it's like, my friend said she can't find that guy. And it's like that meme of Robert Downey Jr. I'm like doing his thing in front of the screen.
that's how we are because we're like, did this person move to a different stage? It's like now we're on the internet finding out.
Oh my god, yeah.
But like, everyone telling you that in 2002, they couldn't figure out that it would be very easy. Like the first scene with like Howard, like it's like you know their address. It's not that hard. You don't have to look for an open door.
Do you know what I said that was really interesting? That this pre-crime unit focuses really probably exclusively on just murder, right?
Oh yeah.
They're not stopping rapes.
But they say it. They address it. They say it. Like it's because this is a next level of passion to take away someone's life.
However, they're talking about how the homicide levels were just out of control and they're trying to control the crime rates. But this entire pre-crime unit process system spurs so many other crimes and so many other issues within society, right? We have these drug dens.
Yeah.
We have this black market of hydrants.
So we also have like,
It's like anything. When you try to tamp something down, the black market springs up around it.
Right, look at prohibition. That's the easiest example of it.
You're 100% right. So like the fact that they were doing eye trick, like
that was disgusting. So, but even like just this Robert damage, right? Like you think about like when they were like trying to get him and they were fighting to like detain him, like they just smashed through a bunch of different apartments.
they did,
like,
and people
destroy buildings. They barely.
One lady was yelling, "Get out of my house."
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. But they just like destroy property, like willy-nilly, putting a lot of people at risk. Like somebody doesn't hurt.
Right in their minds, as in they're stopping murder.
Right. They're stopping the murder, but they are creating a whole slew of other issues that they're basically saying are not nearly as important as murder.
And that's what they say. They like literally said it outright. They're like, because you're taking away someone's life, and that's another level.
The biggest offense.
So we have categorized that is the highest crime.
They have, right?
Well, I think most people in this country are agree it's the highest crime.
Yeah, but sure, I don't disagree with that. But I guess what they're saying is that the commentary is everything else is lesser than, and we're just not going to really focus on it so much. Right? Isn't that the implication? I mean, I guess they don't say it outright, but that's the implication.
I don't know whether it's because it's not, because it doesn't rise to the level that murder
Yeah.
prizes.
It ends just by the means.
That
That's what they're saying.
no, I guess what I'm saying is like the precogs are not able to pick up on every little crime. So either they're not capable of it, or they don't want to exhaust that with every crime.
But they're also basically saying that all these other things, all these other byproducts of like this whole system, that like they are creating other kind of like, you know, crimes and underworld of like whatever, that it's the ends are justifying the means. As long as we're preventing murder, it's okay that it's springing up other types of criminal behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess so they want to roll it out to the rest of the country, and so I guess then the question is,
All right. So you guys know that's true. So the precogs are seeing emotionally charged events. I don't know.
But they do say they do say it doesn't, that like rape is not part of this. Like that's also
But that's also emotionally charged.
right. So, but they specifically list that one as not being one of the ones that they're
Yeah.
using it for.
yeah. I just it also, to me, the question is, if and when they roll it out to the rest of the country, which is what their intention is, are these 3 precogs supposed to be in charge of the whole country, or are they now going to be effectively holding other?
They would probably get other precogs also because just like in terms of the time like spent, like I mean, how much can they spout out of their mouth or like out of their brains, like if they're
And also, is there like a geographical like limit restriction, or can they only see what's within like a certain?
It seems like this one was only within DC. Like they're not protecting, and I don't know how they control that, but like when they're laying there, it's not like in Minnesota right now, this is gonna happen.
They're controlling them pretty severely. So there's got to be a way.
Right.
They're programming them in some way where they're giving them presumably some sort of radius clause, radius clause, right?
Yeah.
That's what we call when we do divorce settlement agreements. A radius clause is when one parent.
You can't move within a certain miles of clearance. Yeah.
See, so that's probably what they're doing with these precogs.
Talk about the title of the movie.
Oh, the minority is that.
Minority is the minority report.
Minority
It's
report.
one.
It's a flaw on the system. Is that like one?
So the perfect system is not
It's not perfect, and they didn't want anyone to know this because one of the precogs would get something wrong, like or see something differently than the other two,
Right.
And
Not
then
necessarily wrong.
but differently, and so 2 of them are seeing the same thing. One, and they have really stressed that Agatha, the girl precog, is the strongest
of them.
Well, I mean, let's be clear, she's the female.
But he whereas when they're like, wait, we can't continue, like the scientist who takes care of them, they're like, wait, so now that because John takes Agatha and they're like on the road.
Yeah, basically kidnapped.
And they're like, well, you're saying we can't like continue this without her? And he's like, no, like the 3 of them work together. It's a hive mind. And you're like, maybe if it was one of the boys, we could maybe continue because they're not as strong. But she's the strongest one.
Right. Like
Without her, it all from
was the strongest.
And that is really what turns out to be the whole thing of the movie, is that without Agatha, this whole thing doesn't work.
Right. And so what they discovered, the creators of this, the guy in charge, what they've discovered is that there is this minority report that's issued, right? One of them sees a different vision.
And she disagrees with the other. So they call it the minority report.
Right. And rather than expose this really potential flaw in
Well, because what that says to people is that the future is actually not fixed.
Right.
It's not fixed because they're not in a
Because the system doesn't work unless you buy into the idea that you are fated.
And it could be a deviation. There can't be a deviation.
Because if there's a deviation, the whole thing falls apart.
And so what they do is they then hide this minority report within Agatha. They like hide it in her as if she's like a computer, as if she's, and then that's what he kidnaps her for.
Well, because they hide it in her. They don't. One of them does, one of the scientists, because they delete that minority report. They delete that file, and he's like, "Is there any other copy? Like, where can I get it?" He's like, "I've hidden it in one other place, like that they don't know about." In Agatha herself, because that's something that the higher ups aren't able to access.
Right. And he has to kidnap her, and then he takes her to a hacker who hooks her up to.
Well, happens to be in another illegal
right
place, as tends to happen.
You can do virtual reality right now, where you're shooting zombies, or shooting in a war. It's kind of like playing a Call of Duty. You are pretending to shoot other people.
Except that the one guy says that he wants to see himself killing his boss.
Yeah, but how is that different than playing a game like a first person? My husband would kill me if I didn't know this. The first player shooter games, whatever it is, where you're literally Call of Duty, and you are shooting other people. You are not people you know, but that's what you're looking at.
The difference is that he wants to actually envision someone that he knows. He wants to envision killing.
But is that what would take it to illegal?
But illegal in the sense that under this pre-crime area where they're living, he could actually be convicted for that because they could assume he intends to kill.
Well, if they like can't tell a difference. I mean, look, if you
you might not be able to.
if you were somewhere where you could do target practicing, and then you put somebody's face on the target that you know, does that make it suddenly illegal to shoot in your backyard?
Or if I go, damn you.
Yeah.
Well,
You're just pretending.
the owner of that establishment gets like really mad about it and is like, get out of here with that shit. Like he doesn't want to put that up for him. I guess he understands the implications of that, or what that could mean.
Well, right. So like the question becomes like, is it that it's illegal? Does it bring up different kinds of questions? It's not clear whether that would spark a crime. But it's like kind of important to note that like what happens with the minority report, what it effectively does, that there is a minority report, is that it introduces the idea of reasonable doubt.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's it. Like
The system fails.
the system fails because now you are not. You can only convict someone if it's a crime, if it's beyond a reasonable doubt.
At least the
But
way
now-
now
now
I feel like they changed it.
Now, if 1 out of 3 precogs sees this differently, now it's reasonable doubt.
Right.
Yeah. So that's, I think.
And this is the really the fatal flaw of this entire pre-crime setup, right? Because now we know
Because they're still, and even if it's only a 1 in a million shot that this other possibility happens, it's still a possibility.
And so we see this coming to fruition when Tom Cruise tracks down this alleged victim and is standing there pointing the gun at him. And he's basically like, I have no choice. Clearly, Agatha, you saw it in your mind. That's what's going to happen.
And she says you do have a choice.
And she herself says, you do have a choice. And in fact, he does. He
stops.
Instead of shooting him, he just starts reading him his Miranda rights.
And the Miranda rights still exist.
And-
Which why? I don't get it.
I know.
I don't even understand.
You know, it's not that you have the right to an attorney. No, you don't. You could be suspended at some sort of a goo.
That made you.
Yeah. But also, he even remembers what the Miranda rights are. He hasn't recited them to anyone in the last 6 years.
Well, like I've never arrested someone. I know, right?
And I know.
But like, and then
Only because you watched a lot of law.
obviously that's the only reason. But like, yeah. So like, and going back to this whole idea of like being suspended and like Haley, like that would be considered like cruel and unusual punishment.
100%.
Like in my mind, it's almost akin to like living in a la la land. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but they
Like, and we have protections against like infinite detention. Like you have like, and that's kind of like.
Well, I guess in this, did they say it's infinite detention?
They don't say.
They don't say
it, but they don't.
Like, what if you are getting just 25 years in the suspended animation? I'm Audrey. Do you age? Do you not? I don't know.
You know what? It can't be clear in it because it's only been around for 6 years.
Yeah.
And anyone who is going to be jailed, imprisoned for like the crime of murder would be there for more than 6 years.
Not in double jeopardy.
Not in double jeopardy, obviously, but that movie is the most ghostly one in the air. Like literally, we covered that extensively because that movie is that's the worst. Yes, okay.
But right, when someone commits a murder, right, in our current society,
Yeah.
not everybody gets the same time in
Right.
prison, right?
No, for some of you're getting more than 6 years.
Some people get life in prison without parole.
So you get the possibility of
45 to life, but the possibility of parole.
The implication in this movie is that everyone just across the board, everyone gets the same punishment because we have no idea. Everyone just gets sent away.
And what happens if it's like we have certain defenses where like by reason of insanity. So now do you not have a insanity?
Apparently, you don't. No.
Like what like mental
I
illness?
mean, I could easily suggest that the character of Howard at the beginning snapped, right? Yeah. And it just could be a reasonable.
But that's
I'm not saying it is, but who knows? He could have been.
That's a crime of passion.
But he doesn't have.
no. But what you're talking
But
about,
we have put that defense.
Yeah, but he would still be convicted of murder.
he would be convicted of
Of manslaughter.
isn't a crime of passion manslaughter?
I believe so. It's just that it's not as
Right.
right as
But again, they don't make
Premeditation
any of those distinctions, whether it's premeditated
they
or
don't.
not. There is no distinction in the punishment. You get that halo,
right, murder is murder is murder.
right? It doesn't matter whether you.
Although those shows one thing, like for instance, like drunk driving and you kill someone with drunk driving, like they don't need a little asshole. They don't show whether like the precogs are predicting that because that's a vehicular manslaughter charge.
and they don't.
Yeah.
They don't address that.
Crime of passion, it's not premeditated, so it's usually manslaughter.
The only distinction that is made between premeditated and crime of passion is not in the punishment. It's in how much time they have to catch the guy. That's it.
Right. You have 4 days to go find him or 36 minutes. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So what's the time with John's. It was
36 hours.
Thursday.
You're right, it's 8 hours.
So
But like the first time I saw it was like 40 minutes.
Well, it's actually funny because he makes the comment of what kind of idiot is doing premeditated murder under this system.
Right.
You would have to be stupid. Yes, sir. That would be you.
well, the second he said that, you were like, all right, this is what we get into. Cool.
Then there's so separate from the fact that now like citizens just have like no rights at all.
Yeah.
And the entire constitution has been shat on, but then you got these 3 precogs and what like the idea that they are just prisoners
They are.
in this world. Like they're that's like
That it was justified.
satisfying.
It's justified because it's for the higher good,
Yes.
or the greater good. So it's for the greater good. They're whether you want to do this or you not want to do this, we're going to make you do this because you're going
And all they simply were, we're basically just children of drug users and unfortunately now being used for this. And I mean, in the end, you see that Agatha and those twin boys are living in like a remote cabin somewhere, reading loads of books and grew up
And
there.
then at the end, when everybody basically it came to light that there are flaws in the system
And
that it can't be
And that was being like
Yeah.
purposely pushed
And
out
the
from the public.
program is shut down.
and it's shut down.
Mhm.
Right. And at least it was. I think it was the right result.
Interestingly, they never resolve the kidnapping of his son. You never find out what happened, why, and what that kid's face does.
So my question was, did the head of the crime unit or the pre-crime unit?
Well, and actually, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Talk.
Well, I was going to say whether he set all of that in motion. Like, is the implication that he was responsible for the kidnapping?
So there's an odd theory.
Fred,
of that.
so that he could then lure Tom Cruise.
I don't buy that.
There is that theory, and I read that theory before I rewatched the movie a few nights ago, and so I was like kind of looking for it. There's nothing that suggests that, except for the idea that
It's not like
like
there was anything special about Tom Cruise that it had to be him.
unless we don't know that he might have just been like a very like talented, like an amazing
Yeah, but he was a cop in Baltimore. Like, I had no disrespect, but like he was a cop like any other cop.
They have it's harder to be a cop in Baltimore.
Is
It's
that
very
harder than New York City? I'm gonna set off some
the tough, like no, the tough streets, whatever of Baltimore.
The Wire was
I've been to Baltimore.
Okay.
It's just,
I
it's hardcore.
I like Baltimore.
No, I mean the point is, maybe you don't necessarily need to be Tom Cruise. Maybe it just needed to be. There needed to be a spark.
He had a motivation. He had motivation.
He needed for someone to run this unit who was like really like just motivated by something so like visceral.
Right, so-
And I think after he joined
Yeah.
and he got mentored by that guy, and it was like he basically saw him as this heir apparent sort of a thing
Yeah.
in a way. He was the chief. He became the chief, so he was totally in on it. I don't think it was intended before, but he definitely became the head girl. Yeah, he became the most like enthusiastic about the pre-crime unit, I would say.
The most interesting thing I thought was so like the big kind of twist-ish thing is not just the fact that there's a minority report, but that so they keep talking about how these precogs there's echoes. So they'll see something and then they might see it again because it's just like it's like an aftershock, right? And so and they usually are just like, oh, that's just an echo, and they just kind of like push it away like it's nothing. And so it's Lamar who's suffering.
Oh, I've learned about that. That's a trauma event that these people are reliving, right? They're forced to see people getting murdered over and over again, and the aftershock that they want to call it is really PTSD.
Right, but it's an
aftershock.
That is really the whole idea of what happens
Yeah.
as a plumber. And so, if someone doesn't remember the movie, what ends up happening is she keeps showing this image, Agatha, the main precog, this image of this woman, Anne Lively, being drowned and killed in this lake.
And you
see who's this guy? You see this guy who was doing it, and then they're like, oh, that's somebody who was arrested for this woman's murder that the precogs had, a premonition about, right? They had preceded it. And it comes to light.
but he's a John Doe.
He's
After all it was these like years and all of this identification, and even John Anderton says, why is he still a John Doe?
Why isn't it figured out who he is?
Right.
So it turns out that it what happened was Lamar, just a plumber who oversees
That's why, yeah.
he needs Agatha. She's the most important precog, and it's her mother's Anne Lively who's trying to get her back. She's cleaned herself up. She's no longer a drug user. She wants her daughter back. She doesn't want her to be in this precog system, but then the whole system would fail. So in order to shut her up and make this, make sure he has time, he kills her. But he knew that the precogs would see him killing her.
Right.
So he sets up the murder, hires this John Doe to go almost murder her. The police unit does their job. They pre-crime stops him. They take him away and imprison him. And then he is able to come in dressed similarly and actually carry out the murder, knowing that when anyone in the pre-crime system views it, they're just going to think it's an echo. Right? They're just seeing it over and over again, and it was the original murder or about to happen.
Right away. That's nothing. A brilliant idea.
Right.
No.
So that is like the thing that he, eventually we figure out in the end that's what happened to Aunt Lively.
There again.
The problem is and we see this with Colin Farrell. When Colin Farrell, who's one of the agents, who you think is kind of like an asshole, but it turns out he's very smart. He's very smart, and he comes to Chris Plummer and explains this, like what he's figured out.
The only thing is he didn't figure out that it was him.
Well, I think he was almost insinuating that he did know, because he's like, the only person who could have done this is someone who had an intimate, like, first-hand knowledge of the echoes and how the precogs work.
Like
He's kind of like, you did this.
Yeah.
And then Chris Plummer shoots him and kills Colin Farrell once he figures that out.
By the way, the only lawyer in the movie, and he ends up dead.
I know. But he figures that out, and, obviously, Chris Plummer...
former priest. I thought that was interesting.
Yes, right.
Yeah, that's true. And Chris Plummer doesn't want him to know this, and so he kills him. Now, if ever that did come out, even if the precog system continued, that now opens the door to
That it's
any single person who wants, anyone who wants to commit murder, a premeditated murder, just has to plan out a potential murder, get it taken care of, and then finish the deed yourself. Yeah. And so there's so many flaws. I thought this movie was brilliant because it really explored all these different flaws of something like this.
And because I think it makes you think, hey, you know what? That's actually kind of cool. You can do something like that, prevent crime, blah, 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 blah. But then you start taking a hard look at all of the moral issues and why we have checks and balances or why we don't assume.
And honestly, shed a lot of light as to why we have all these protections, unlawful search and seizures and right to a trial by jury, and all of this is so the Constitution's important. That's the moral of the story.
Moral of the story: read your Constitution.
Read your Constitution and get familiar with it.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you don't know at least the first 18 amendments, what are you doing? Honestly.
Get on that. Get on that.
Right?
Next time we'll quiz everyone.
We're gonna quiz everyone. We'll do
Oh
a
my
live
gosh.
pop
All right.
quiz.
So, how many precogs do we give this?
I guess probably a little higher because they
7?
do take it. Yeah, I would say 7 or 8, even because they
Do
do.
you? Why?
Because they address the fact that
But
there's so much wrong with this.
I know, but they
and,
violate every part of it.
and then they reverse it.
I guess
highlight it.
I don't know. I'm
are you
low
giving
on
it?
I'm low on the precog scale. I'm like
Yeah.
a 3.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I
Like
thought
a
it did better
3.
than that.
If they let it all continue thereafter, then sure.
But for the last 6 years, they've been continuing it.
But it's
Right.
still only a test. And look, you do have to have a test subject to do this stuff. Look, I don't fault their
I don't-
motivations.
I am not sure that, let's say in 2025, I almost said 2024 for some reason. In 2025, I don't believe that the Supreme Court would find this test constitutional. And I don't think that it would be
Right.
put into effect.
But in
I mean,
2054,
we don't know.
perhaps.
We don't know.
We'll see.
In any case,
Or maybe we'll just go the route of the purge.
I
I like that
that's also
idea.
pretty likely. Jenny can't wait.
I'm not watching that movie. There's certain movies that I'm more than happy to cover.
I watched them all.
No, I'm happy to discuss them, but we're gonna have to do it as like a blind recording type of thing. You guys are just gonna tell me the summary, and I will blind react.
And we'll just
I
have
won't
Jenny's
watch the
facial
movie.
features reacting to it
I won't watch
in
it.
horror.
I won't watch it. Thank you guys
Thank you.
for joining us.
Yep.
I mean, this was kind of fun. This was
liked it.
this was a legal quagmire.
It was. Oh, it's a big
it
word. I
was.
like that.
It was.
Catch us on YouTube. Let's Ruin It Podcast. Catch us on Instagram. Let's Ruin It Podcast.
Spotify.
Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We are going to do some really, really fun movies coming up. We have some less serious constitutional violations.
This is a more serious one.
Yeah, for sure.
Next time we're going to do like a rom-com.
We will absolutely do a rom-com. Maybe we'll do something with aliens.
Oh, perhaps.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
A little teaser.
Smash that like and subscribe button. Check us out and send us your suggestions of other movies you'd like us to ruin or pick apart and teach you something about.
Do we teach people?
I don't think so.
I don't know.
But
I mean, we try.
who knows?
Thank you guys for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.